Hello, this is Giovanni here at Fraptools, and welcome to the first episode of what I hope will be a long series of videos. Today, I will have a conversation with a guest, with a musician that uses the modular synthesizer, uses Fraptools module, and we will discuss their approach towards this kind of instruments and the way they make their music. Throughout the video, we will also see one patch made by them specifically to demonstrate their ideas, and we will break the patch down and discuss its implications and applications. At the end of the video, we will meet again, but in Fraptools Studio, where I will try to incorporate what they said into a Frap-only setup. So today's guest is an Italian musician. His name is Francesco Gennari, and he recently released an album for Important Records. Hi, Francesco. Thanks for joining us. So from the short bio I see on the Imprex site, I see that you are classically trained, but your background has a much wider span from noise punk and DIY instruments. So that bio is quite short. So I mean, if you want to add anything, it would be nice to know more about your musical style and your musical journey.
Yes, I start when I was 7 years old playing piano, and later I start studying in Conservatory of Brescia in my city. Besides that, I always playing other instrument. So I play guitar, I play bass, and I play them in a band with few friends. But also the genre that we do is different. We do some punk. At that time, we listen a lot of hardcore punk like Bad Brains, Minor Threat, Black Flag.
I see.
And later, I start play bass in another band with a couple of my friends, and we play some sort of noise. So it's the first time that I use a lot of effect like distortion, delay, fuzz, and
I see.
And I try for the first time some synth.
So it was your journey as a bass player that led you to synthesizer rather than coming from the piano.
Yes.
And would you like to also tell me how you discovered the modular synthesizer and what led you to seek for this kind of instrument?
Well, the first proper synthesizer that I own is a Microkorg. When I was 17, I broke both of my knees skateboarding, so I've got a lot of free time, and I bought this Microkorg that helped me to expand my knowledge in the synthesis. Later, I start using Pure Data. So I'm using it because I own the organelle, and I try to do some patches for it. The modular system in the pure data and my interest for the hardware instrument lead me to the modular synthesizer.
Okay.
Thanks also to one of my friends that build and use modular synth.
I see. So it was a sort of natural expansion of the digital modular environment that you discovered through the organelle.
Yes.
And would you like to talk a bit about your album? I reckon that the modular synthesizer plays a huge role in that album. That I will say that again is out for Important Records. Perhaps I will link to that in the description of the video so that anyone can listen to that. And I was particularly curious about your setup for that kind of album that had a very melodic, not to use an overused term, but it had a very melodic connotation, especially since we just talk about harsh noise punk, your harsh noise punk background. So,
yes.
Yeah, I would like to hear more about your setup, so also your technical description of what you used to make that album, but also, if we have time, to hear a bit about your ideas behind the work.
Frammenti was made entirely with the modular. I use only a couple of other synthesizer, but the main instrument is my system and a couple of effects.
So I was curious to hear about the reason behind the modular synthesizer for such a harmony-centered kind of work, because oftentimes people tend to say if your focus is polyphony, if your focus is a deep harmonic texture, the modular synthesizer might be a bit overkill or a bit cumbersome to handle multiple voices, and oftentimes it is regarded more as an instrument for sound design rather than for complex orchestrations. So I would like to know what is your point of view on that.
Yes, my approach to modular it's really melodic and harmonic, because when I write, when I compose, I start from a melodic line or a melodic phrase.
So basically, your first idea is a melody most of the time. Okay,
yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
So you're not the kind of patcher that finds the music out when playing, or does that happen as well?
Maybe sometimes, but it's more about the variation of the melody that I wrote. Yes.
Okay, I see. That's very interesting. So you always turn on your modular with already a melodic idea in mind.
Yes, in mind, on the or in my hands, because I played or I came up with while I'm playing the piano. So I write it down in a sketchbook, and later I transcribe it to Tusta.
Okay, so that is quite interesting. I would have asked this question later on, but since you brought up the topic, I think it's worth diving a little bit more. Actually, it's a bit of two questions. The first one is what would have been how your classical training influenced your compositional approach towards the modular. And to me, it seems that the composition still takes place in a in the piano world, and then it is somehow transferred to the modular synthesizer. Did I get it right?
Yes, correct. I think that, of course, my classical background influenced the way I see the music, I write music, and the most important influence, I think it's in the importance that I attribute to the melodic element. So I prefer to write different melodies, like in a counterpointic way, and then make the two melodies interact between each other.
A few masters of counterpoint are capable of creating great music that you don't necessarily need to understand in order to enjoy it. And I think that many tracks of your album kind of reflects this approach. My first impression was that yes, the music is good, the melodic element is upfront, and it's recognizable and it's enjoyable. But if you want to listen to a track a second time and you want to listen to it in a more vertical way, you can find some clever tricks that seem to draw from counterpoint. And if you want to talk a bit about maybe with a few examples of how the counterpointistic mindset help you sketching out a patch.
Yes, the first stuff is that, as you say previously, the modular is primarily monophonic. So there are a separation between every voice in the modular. I use usually I use from 3 to 5 voices in my tracks, and some of them got also some layers on it.
It's some kind of texture, it seems, like the combination of horizontal and vertical.
Yes.
In order something like that.
Yes, of course, and with this intersection of the voice, you can see more clearly the harmonic element of the track.
So it's as if the counterpointistic approach is transferred also to the timbre side when you talked about layers. So it's
Yes.
a sort of, I don't know if it's the correct comparison, but it seems that also reminds me of the approach of the serialists, where you treat the sequence of timbres or sequence of other musical parameters rather than pitch as a musical element. Is that somehow correct?
Yes, of course. The timbre is one of the most important element for me, and is one of the sequencing part of the track, of the pattern. So as the notes in the melodic line in the voice, also the timbre got some type of sequencing, sometime completely intentionally, and some other with some random modulation, some tamed random modulation.
So what kind of what is your approach towards randomization, since we brought up this very hot topic for modular
I use Sapel as a random source, and I clock each channel of Sapel with two different gate output of Usta. So these two output is some subdivision of the master clock, or sometimes I create a rhythmic pattern that clock the Sapel section.
I see.
And all the output, like the sample and hold, can for example modify the waveform of the oscillator, or the amount of folding of the wave multiplier, or something like that.
So even though there is a timbral kind of randomization, you somehow hold everything together through a sort of rhythmic element. You through the rhythmic consistency of the piece, you are able to tame, in that sense, the randomization.
Yes, it's important for me having everything under the control of some type of brain. In this case, Usta is the brain of the modular. So every clock, every impulse, every gate, it's an element that is important for the track.
What was your main idea behind the whole album? Was there a sort of common ground that where you know, a sort of concept, let's say, behind the whole album, or was it more a sort of collection of pieces you wrote throughout a span of time?
I think that the main concept of Frammenti is that every track is a little piece of a journey, a musical journey, a sonic journey that every time you change from one track to another, you listen to something different, but with recognizable elements. For example, I try to use the same timbre of one voice for every track. So, for example, the first voice is similar, is not the same, but in 3-4 track is like the same chain with different element, as I said, but is similar, so is recognizable. And I think it's important that every voice is have to be different from each other in timbre, because when you have a lot of voice stuck one by one, you can follow the second voice, you can follow the bass, you can follow all the path in the track.
Okay, so Francesco, I know that you have already prepared a patch to demonstrate those concepts, and I think that we can listen to that first, and then we can hear your patch breakdown, and then we will meet again to discuss the patch.
There are three voices that are sequenced by Usta. The first one is sequenced by the track 1. The CVA goes into the volt per octave plus portamento of the NTO. The saw goes in the second channel of the wave multiplier, because I really like the flavor of the folding on a saw wave. And then goes into the Doppler low pass gate and sounds like this. The CVA of the track number 2 goes into the disting in oscillator mode. That goes into the SEM VCF. And this is the bass voice and sounds like this. Yes, it's pretty boring alone. The gate A output of the second track is the clock for the main delay that I use, that is the Strymon timeline. And the CVB output goes into the CVA input of Usta for pitch shifting the first sequence, the first voice. The track number 3 controls the piston onda. The CVA goes into the slew input of Falistri for some gliding, and the output goes into the oscillator. Then the output A of the piston onda goes into the dual low pass gate, passive low pass gate of TACAP, and sounds like this. All the voices have different layers in addition to the main one. For example, for the first voice, I added 2 more layers for creating some rhythmic and panning effect. Sapel creates some tamed random signal that I use for create some movement in the patch. The 2 section is clocked to the first 2 track of Usta, the gate B of the first track and the gate B of the second track, and I'm using it for CV control the fold section of the wave multiplier or the FM amount between the 2 oscillator of the piston onda or the cutoff of the low pass gate of the first voice. The first voice, for example, is divided in 2 parts. The first one is the more percussive that you can hear in the track, and the second one is created by open up the low pass gate with the sample and hold output of Sapel, one channel of Sapel, and so the other elements, the other notes that is hide by the closing low pass gate can be revealed with this opening.
I see. So you have a complex melodic line, and through the gates, on or off, you select which notes do play of that. So you are actually hiding multiple melodies within a single oscillator. Is that correct?
Yes.
Ah, that's very clever. That's very clever. So basically, this allows you to also switch, if you want, from one melody to another by changing the gate pattern, theoretically, at least.
Yes.
I see.
You can do it.
And you can also define which the amount of voice A versus voice B. That's very nice. And so this was like the first voice, you say, the one that plays with the NTO.
Yes.
And what about the other two? Since you said there are three, I mean, this is quite. I'm a bit confused, honestly, because I don't know if you are talking about voices as if, like in theory, or actual voices, like actual sound sources.
Actual sound sources and also the
because now you have actually hidden two voices within one oscillator. So
yes, but is only one voice because at some time you can hear the whole melody line. And so is only some element is like having a voice with some variation of it. In this case is some other notes.
So the bass seems to play long sustained notes, right?
Yes.
Which is something that can be found also in other tracks of yours. You have this very mellow bass tone that provides a sort of, it's almost like a pedal kind of sound.
It's always sawtooth that goes into a filter, and it's and that's it.
Okay.
There is some variation on the cutoff of the filter, but it's a little variation of it.
So you don't, and the second voice is kind of responding to the first one. What is its role behind in the composition?
The third voice entering later in the track, and it is like a response to the first one, but there is not thematic element in common. There are different rhythmic pattern, different melody, and different structure of the melodic line.
Okay, so it's somehow what you were saying at the beginning of this conversation, when you say you'd like to start with two melodies sometimes and then see how they can interact with each other.
Yes.
So they are somehow both. They have more or less the same weight and the same role in a way. Let's talk a bit about Usta and Falistri, and of course we already talked about Sapel, but would you like to tell a bit about the role Usta plays in your music?
Well, Usta is the main brain of my modular, so is the main and the only sequencer, and as I said, I transcribe some melody to Usta while I composing. But it happened also to adding some variation in time or in pitch to this melody, and Usta is also the main clock of all the system, because I clock the Sapel, I clock with the gate the envelope on Falistri, I clock the delay line, I use different delay lines, like 2 ping pong delay lines and one other delay, and I clock everything with Fusta. It's not the main clock. Maybe some division, maybe is a rhythmic pattern, but I use it like that.
I see, because one thing that strikes me about your songs and also about this patch here that we are discussing is that every note has, you can see that everything has a rhythm, but you can feel the rhythm of a note in relation to the previous one and the following one. But it's harder to me to grasp a global rhythm because it's almost ever changing, and it's when you feel like you say, okay, now this is in 3, then there is something that is not quite in 3 and leads you elsewhere. So I would like to talk a bit about your approach to this kind of. Can we talk about polyrhythm in this case?
Yes, of
and
course.
How do you achieve it on the modular? Is it more on the Usta, or is it more with the delay in the style of, let's say, Caterina Barbieri?
It's both of them, because I think that it's for me, I'm comfortable to do different rhythmic section on the Usta, because I can clearly see the length of a stage, and I can also apply some ratcheting on this on the gate output. So it's more easier for me to see a polyrhythmic pattern while I'm writing with Fusta. But of course, I'm using different delay lines for help me to create this sense of non-stable rhythm.
And since you talked about the visual feedback of the Usta, I would like to know how do you find its way of writing music as someone who starts with a score first and foremost? Do you take advantage of the composition mode with the asynchronous editing, or I mean, how do you approach the Usta from a classical musician standpoint?
Yes, I'm using composition mode for transcribe the pattern that I write outside the modular, and I think that the number of output, the number of channel that you have per track, so the four output help me to achieve a more complex sound and a more complex chain. So I really enjoy using it for performing and writing.
Okay, I see. Because it's funny, because the composition mode actually came in. I mean, the asynchronous editing, where you can scan your melodic line, actually came up quite a later stage in the development. I don't know if you know the backstory on that, but the Usta didn't have that originally, and I remember that I was testing the prototype. And I said, well, I will start the testing with a 4-part fugue by Bach, because if it does that, then everything else is more or less in place. And then I found it was very hard to write a melody with the sequencer that keeps spinning. And I said to Simone, is there a way to edit the stages in a more relaxed way? I mean, not within the performance, but before. And that's how it came up. So I'm quite glad that someone who is so focused on counterpoint actually takes advantage of this feature.
Yes, it's really useful and help a lot to
because there are
write.
many different approaches. Because, for example, Simone is someone who is more writes the melody as the sequencer goes, and I'm sure that many musicians do that. Perhaps those who are more into the variation of a pattern and this kind of thing. And I think that it is important that to satisfy both approaches, but still staying consistent with the device. Okay, Francesco, so we talked about the Usta, we talked about Sapel, but you also mentioned Falistri. So I would like to ask how you use it perhaps we saw how you used it in this patch, but more in general, I would like to know if there is other approaches you have towards this module, which is not a single-purpose module.
I use Falistri as a oscillator. Sometimes, so one section, I speed it up to
audio rate,
and the second channel I use every time as a envelope, as a AD envelope. I also use the flip-flop section as a clock divider, and one trick that I find interesting is to take the less than or more than clock output of Sapel and put in the input of one channel of the flip-flop section, and then I use the division of that clock for clocking one of my delay line.
Ah, nice. So it's a randomized gate that is like half the impulses. So you're using the flip-flop as for its logic function. I mean, you take two raising edges to change the state up or down. Okay, so Francesco, I see that you have an Escher print in the background, and it's not the first time that Escher and Counterpoint are often put together. So I'm thinking about the Hofstadter book about Gödel, Escher, and Bach. And I would like to know if that works also for you. I mean, if that artist is somehow a sort of inspiration for the way you handle your melodies.
Yes, of course, is one of my favorite visual artists, and Gödel, Escher, Bach is the book that I use in the 5th grade of high school for doing my exam, my final exam.
Really?
Yes.
That's that couldn't have been a coincidence, seeing the Gödel printing in the background. So just wanted to make sure of that. Okay, so one final question. We talked about the modules that you have. You also told me that you have the two utilities, the 321 and the 333. But I would like to ask if you could choose the next FrapTools module, the one that doesn't exist, and what would it be?
I'd like to see a module like a wave folder the wave folder section of Brenso, for example, but in a separate module.
Okay. And how would you see such a tool? How do you already use a wave folder in your patch? Because you do have like quite complex voices already, it seems. So how do you incorporate the wave folder, and what kind of feature would you expect from a standalone wave folder? For example, multiple channels or a peculiar internal routing, stuff like that.
Multiple channel, I think, is one feature that I'd like to see for a wave folder. Maybe also multiple input for it. You can multiply and do some AM with the two input of the channel and a section for the folding.
So kind of a complex tool for amplitude management, something like that.
Yes. Yes.
And how do you use the wave folder? You mentioned that earlier in your setup you have the surge one, the wave multiplier. And how do you use it with voices that are maybe already complex by themselves?
For example, I use it in one of the voice chain, the primary voice chain, and I take one output of the oscillator, for example, the sawtooth or the sine, but I tend to use the sawtooth, the sawtooth, and I fold it before the low pass gate. In other situation, I use it like a distortion. So at the end of the chain of one voice, of one layer of the voice, I use one channel as distortion for it.
So yeah, thank you very much, Francesco, for staying with us and for the very interesting conversation. I remind that your album Frammenti is out for Important Records, both as digital download and cassette tape. I will put the link in the description. And thank you again for joining us, and we will see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Goodbye, Francesco. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, we are back at Fraptools studio, and this is my patch inspired by Francesco's ideas. We will hear it and then I will break it down. Okay, so in this patch I have my sequence number 1, which plays something like this. I use the trick of Francesco to have a very displaced melody, which spans across 3 octaves, and by using the gates it kind of fakes more voices. And on track 2 I have the steady bass that I have sawtooth straight into the Kunsa. And on track 3 I have another melody. Instead of having a repeatable pattern of gates, I choose to play with the gate variations. So I set my stages of tracks 3 and 1 with the 2 melodies to have 2 gate length, and then I set the variation index to half, so they have a 50% probability to change, and the index to 2, so they might be anything between 0 and 4, which causes some unexpected pauses to have this kind of bouncy rhythm. And I also played with a delay to emphasize this kind of bouncy rhythm, and I used the same bass line duplicated on CVB of track 2 in pitch mode as a pitch shifting tool that enters later on in the patch, while still staying in the Aeolian mode. Something that I didn't do could have been using my CVB of track 1 to, for example, change the timbre through the wave folder. Which adds even more texture. And I think that we can cap it here for today's video. I hope you found this chat inspiring as much as I did, and I hope that these tips and approaches might be useful for your modular compositions. That's all for now, and I will see you next time.